His name was Glenn. He lived by himself. He had what they call LADA diabetes, latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. It's the same thing as type 1, where your body attacks your beta cells that produce the insulin, and you end up not having any beta cells, no way to produce any insulin. Well, this is a slower process in some adults who end up with diabetes, and often they're misdiagnosed as having type 2 diabetes when they really have this, which is a slow form of type 1. This was Glenn. He had had it for 20 years or so. And he was, he went down, I had some business cards down at the pharmacy, and he came in to get some sort of medication, and he saw one there, and he came, and he started coming. And Clarence, you probably remember him, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and maybe Roger. But Glenn would come, and we used to have these seminars at the library. And we would invite people to the community to come. And we would send out these flyers, and we would have to number them, and it would categorize by each mail route and all that, you know. And so he would come and help organize that and count the flyers and all of that. He really got involved. And of course, we would set up in the community room. Has anyone been at the library, the community room there? Have you been there? Joan, have you been there?
We've been there.
Yeah. Anyway, I have to set up the chairs and all of that, and he helped do that along with Clarence and Roger there. Well, Glenn had real difficulty in maintaining the control he needed to. Blood glucose control was a perpetual struggle for him. And God's designed the human body in a marvelous way that when carbohydrates are digested and they enter the small intestine, there's a certain hormone, a GLP-1, that is a messenger. It comes to the pancreas, and it lets the beta cells know, hey, we need insulin to cover the carbohydrates that have just been eaten. And God has designed the body in such a marvelous way that just the right amount of insulin is secreted to take care of the amount of carbohydrates you eat so that everything's metabolized perfectly and you stay in a range of 70 to 140. Well, what happens if you have diabetes and you have to take insulin? Then it makes it very difficult because you got to count your carbs. You've got to take just the right amount of insulin for that. And there's all kinds of factors that come into play too. You know, interaction with other people, stress, colds, all that kind of stuff. And so here he was living this way, and it's a tightrope. And that's why I've got this pictured as a tightrope. But here was Glenn. He didn't handle the tightrope very well. He was about to fall off most of the time, in fact. Now, all Glenn had to do was take his insulin at the right time in just the right amount, several times each day, check his blood sugars multiple times a day to make sure that he wasn't too high, too low, balance the right amount of food of the carbohydrates with the insulin that he took, stay alert at all times for stress or cold, which elevates the stress hormone cortisol, causing an elevated blood sugars, and also realize that he must do this every single day because there's not a vacation for diabetes. You're never on vacation. That's how simple it can be. And people like Glenn, they needed encouragement. And we all need to give help and receive help. Glenn had great difficulty maintaining his balance. And that's why I'm showing that, his balance. Now, if you haven't experienced a low blood sugar, I want to give you a reenactment of this, a dramatization, okay? And this is a guy named Jim Turner. He was diagnosed with diabetes in 1970. There used to be a program called D-Life, and they had all kinds of interviews, and they made videos, and some of them were kind of amusing. Jim was kind of their humor guy, but he had type 1 diabetes, and of course he experienced hypoglycemia, low blood sugars. And so he made a little video of what he was experiencing one day to kind of give you a reenactment of how it is. And I want you to notice that here he is walking along, and he's getting very weak. He's becoming incoherent. His vision is being affected. That means that his blood sugar is really getting low. And he doesn't have any energy whatsoever. She's really concerned about him. Try to get him over to a bench somewhere where he can sit down and then go get something. He went on a walk, and his blood sugar was really elevated, and he went out on the walk, and it began to drop rapidly. He never thought it would do that. He said it started like 254, and it started just rapidly dropping. Well, he probably had too much active insulin in his body at the time that he had taken. And he ends up with this situation. And if it continued, he would go unconscious. Okay? Can you imagine if you're driving and you're experiencing that and you go unconscious? That could be really dangerous. So anyway, Glenn, back to Glenn. One day I called him and I kind of paid attention to him. He lived by himself way out on Etowah. And I called him. It was before supper time. He said he had run out. I wanted to know what his blood sugar was. He would tell me. He would respond. I ran out of checking strips. I said, well, right after supper, my wife and I will come out and we'll bring you some. I know what kind of meter he had. We got out there, and I found him in the house, back in the bedroom. He was just in his underwear. He was sitting on the floor and was just in a daze. Well, I brought my kit with me, with my glucometer and all of that, and I go over and I prick his finger. He was 20. I don't even know if he knew who I was, but I was talking to him, and I had these little items, Smarties. You see, when you have a low blood sugar, you're not very smart. You need some Smarties. I mean, it gets real difficult at times. And so I was able to get 3 of those little packages down him because he could still swallow. And then half of another one. So he had about 20 grams of carbohydrate with that. And it's one of the best things that you can use because it quickly is metabolized in the body and brings your blood sugar quickly up. Much better than anything else. So Glenn had this real problem. And 10 days later, I heard that he had another episode. And there was no one there to help him. And he passed away. He died. So that was real difficult. Each day, we need to think about helping others. And then when we're helping others, we're helping ourselves. The prudent see danger and they take refuge. That's a proverb. The wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways. That's another proverb. So a great precaution we can all take if we have diabetes is to check our blood glucose more often. And always have Smarties with you. Always have Smarties with you. And the other practice is to keep focused on helping others. And by checking myself multiple times a day, by always having Smarties with me. And when I started, when I was diagnosed, I used to carry sugar cubes around. Remember sugar cubes? I guess they still make them, I don't know. I'd have them wrapped up, my mom would wrap them up, and I'd have several of them in my pocket, and I'd take them to school with me. I don't even think we had Smarties back then. Back in 1960? No. But by doing that, I've been taken to the hospital once in 61 years. Some people go multiple times, over and over again. You've got to really keep track of it. And so instead of putting people in their place, put yourself in their place. You'll understand better what's going on. So there's insulin and other oral medications that have been around for a number of years, but people are still using them. There's sulfonylureas. And they stimulate a production of insulin, is what they do, in type 2 diabetes. Because you can still produce the insulin. And of course, these are right here, the isles of Langerhans. These are the beta cells, or in these islands in your pancreas. You have about 1 million of these in your pancreas. Each one of them has 2,000 beta cells. So you've got plenty of beta cells, don't you? To supply the insulin that you need. And if your blood glucose was 38, that's getting pretty low. You need to take something to elevate your blood sugar or you go unconscious. Now, if you did go unconscious and you didn't have any diabetes, then we have adrenaline that activates another hormone, glucagon, which is in the liver, and it releases glycogen, which is stored up glucose, and that's released into the body, and it brings up your blood sugar, you see. But if a person has type 2 diabetes, then if the adrenaline activates that and it's released, then you've got extra sugar in there. It may elevate you, but you're compromised because you have to take medication for all of these variables, and you can't maintain that tight control there. So it's easy to get an elevated blood sugar from that. But anyway, what would you do? What would be best to raise the blood glucose? Apple juice, orange juice, Smarties, milk, sweet tarts, sourdough bread, white bread with peanut butter. There's been analysis done of how quickly certain carbohydrates are metabolized. They enter the system and they work quickly. It's called the Glycemic Index, which we'll look at in just a second. Well, someone takes some peanut butter, it's not going to do much. The lower the number, the less effect it has on your blood sugars. And you may have heard, well, you get a low blood sugar, well, get yourself a glass of orange juice. I even heard someone taking milk. He gets a low blood sugar. I heard this years ago. Well, you got to take my milk. Well, yeah, it's a 34. That's real low. Then you can see apple juice, Milky Way, orange juice, sourdough bread, white bread. Now it's getting up there. But look at the ones that it's called dextrose. Smarties and sweet tarts. The same thing, dextrose. So you could get these glucose tablets, which I guess would be 100. But that's 96, that's close, and they're easy to carry, and Smarties taste good. When I get tired of Smarties, I go to sweet tarts. I like either one. But how to correct? There's been studies done about this, that 1 gram of glucose raises the blood sugar. These numbers, this amount, depending on what you weigh. The more you weigh, the less each gram will affect you. The less you weigh, the more power the 1 gram of carbohydrate has. And so I'm more like 150. So I take a Smartie down here, which is a 6 grams. That means I'm going to raise my blood sugar by 24 points. I mean, you can get it pretty close. 5 grams of Smarties, sweet tarts, dextrose, they raises the blood sugar about 20 points. One time at 2 a.m. I got up, I checked my blood sugar, I was 46. And so I took 9 grams of Smarties, 1.5 little packages of Smarties, and I got a little glass of milk, 6 ounces of milk. When I looked, one's a 96, one was a 34. But one's going to last a lot longer than the other. The Smarties will be metabolized quickly and then, leave. The milk will linger around longer. The carbohydrates in it. So, I took, what is that? I took 9 grams and then 6 ounces, 6 grams. 15. I was 46. Well, I took 15. 4 times 15 is 60. I should have been about 106 later that morning. So at 6 o'clock I got up, checked myself, it was 116. I went up 70. That's close. So that's the idea of what you do if you have a low blood sugar. Now, especially if anyone's on insulin, this is a real danger. And certain kind of medications too. But you know that this is serious business. And if you know anyone that can experience that, well, be on the outlook for them. So that's the first one I wanted to talk about. The second one is the use